Inspiration Nation, hello, Lee Kemp here again with Joe Neuer. How are you doing today, Joe?
Always good to be on the podcast with you, Lee. That's always the way, always enjoying it. Glad that you're tuning in as usual.
That's what I like, an enthusiastic start. And you say tuning in because this is week 2 of us being both, I say that there, audio-only and also on YouTube as well, which is good for us. So new territory again, moving out into.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
I think we've had a few positive responses around YouTube, which is really, really good. So you can catch us across our social media platforms. Joe is at JN Coaching Tech. We are at Listen to IN, Listen TOIN. And as always, we'll give that push. If you like what you're hearing, mention it to other people, get them involved, leave us some reviews, all that good stuff.
Yeah, that's great.
So, what is the topic of conversation today, Mr. Neuer?
Okay, so the topic of conversation is really you are what you consume. So entertainment versus education. And it's about things that we watch, things that we consume, and how it affects us really. So that's what we're going to be talking about. So I heard a lot of people go on about this, all the sort of people that inspire me, and I listen to that. Like one of the ones that I saw was Patrick David, and he was the one that sort of highlighted to me around looking at different types of content, how that influences you. So I don't know whether any of you guys got a YouTube. Did you look at YouTube?
No, that's not really my space, if I'm honest.
Okay.
I'm more of a LinkedIn and Facebooker where I watch, and I do, I'll trawl through and I will see videos and articles and stuff that I like on there, and I think they're probably my primary places of seeing stuff outside of when I'm looking for stuff, like looking at the news and that.
Yeah, so a lot of times we look at social media, things like that, we tend to look at, things that are entertaining or drama or things like that. So if you've got a goal or if you want to achieve something, you've really got to start to switch it from that entertainment mode to the things that are going to help you achieve your goal. So it's good to have bound down. So I'm not saying that's not a bad thing. I'm saying is like all the major things you should consume should be around the things you want to achieve. Like, so for me, for instance, is around making sure that I consume all the sort of personal self-development stuff that so if you look at my YouTube history, used to be quite a bit of entertainment on there, but now it's more around.
That's a murky place looking at people's internet histories, Joe. I'm not sure about this.
Let's just look at YouTube. But look at your YouTube history, and if you're looking at it now, look at how much of that's entertainment versus actually what it's teaching you to do. So actually, when we're setting this up, YouTube's a brilliant place because Ryan actually looked up how we plug in microphones. It's a great place. So if you want to get to a space where you want to achieve a goal, then what you consume is what you'll become. So I think that's the real key for me, is whatever you consume on a daily basis, that is what you're going to become.
What you're feeding your mind with.
Yeah, and so you'll start to adopt the things that you're talking about. So if you watch the things with a lot of drama in it, you're going to become that sort of drama type person, because that's what you're getting in your life. That's what bombarding your messages. And I think this is what I want to get people to be aware of that. And again, a bit like last week about your self-awareness, be aware of what you consume, because what you consume will have an influence. Whether you like it or not, whether you think you don't or not, it will, which is the really weirdest thing. And I'll give you a little bit of an example about that as we go through today's podcast. So you don't really go on YouTube much. You said you have a look at your LinkedIn, but what's your sort of LinkedIn type or Instagram type history? What would you say it is? What type of stuff do you consume?
Let me answer your question with a question first.
Okay.
Actually try and take a drink. Do you structure time for this? Do you define to yourself kind of educational growth content time and downtime content, or is it a flex of the two? Do you have a clear distinction in your head? And give an example for me. I used to do, and where I try and kind of control stuff to make sure I'm not too much of a workaholic, I used to be one of those people on the way home from work, if I'm on the train, I'd be like, oh, that's great, I've got an hour on the laptop, I can do more stuff. And stepping into that burnout territory. And I tried from a work thing, and again, back to when we talked about that whole balance thing, I now make sure that train time is actually downtime. So either I can ease into the day and I hit the office fresh rather than already frazzled, or if I'm done, and I'm on the way back home and I'm transitioning to do other things, hopefully harking back to last week so my mind isn't telling me I'm too tired when I got home. So I will view or listen or watch stuff off my entertainment bit when I'm going home, and I'm very deliberate that it's not work stuff. And then I suppose other times I will be, I'm going to do some research on something, I'm very deliberate, I'll look at that stuff. And I suppose there's a grey area in the middle where I'm just flicking, and I could easily go to Facebook and look at some videos about stuff that's linked dead really to comedy because obviously
Yeah.
it follows the internet history, or I could just easily go to LinkedIn and see an article about something in the industry I work in and be quite interested in reading that. So I suppose I've defined periods each time and a bit of a grey area in the middle.
Yeah, I think you've pretty got much balanced, and so when you said about whether I have that personal time, I do. So my one's the morning. So my morning is the whole exercise, our gratitude list. It will then be about maybe consuming a video around whatever the message is for that day, and doing a video, obviously. So a lot of my time is better, but there is a space in my time, like for instance for me, the evenings that I try and, like last week, in fact, I watched a couple of films. I watched The Founder, which is about
That's a
McDonald's.
fantastic
Great
film. That
film,
is
really
fantastic.
But again,
We will give a free plug to that, and I would advocate anyone to watch that film.
yeah, and that's great, isn't it? And
Yeah.
but the thing is, I suppose even when I watch the stuff now, like even though I think it's entertainment, that's still got quite a powerful
And I
message
agree,
behind
that's,
it.
that's that grey, so slightly grey, where it's a film that's out there for entertainment, but I was drawn to it because it's about someone growing a business from nothing and how they did it,
Yeah.
which obviously speaks to my entrepreneurial side. And actually, I've used examples I've picked up from that film in projects and in the workspace as much as I enjoyed it. But back to your actual question about my history stuff. So I obviously, the social media stuff being like it is, it picks up on your interest, or you put yourself in groups. And I work in financial services.
Yep.
And so I'm joined a number of groups, and obviously most of my network is built up from people in the industry I work in. So all the articles I see are related to the industry in which I work, and then I will pick out the ones closely related that I'm interested in. So if you followed my history, it is very built around the things that interest me within the industry I work, and then the more I look at them, the more it pushes that sort of content to me.
And how do you find that influences what you do?
I suppose either it's new information, so it can be stuff to do with the marketplace that's happening now that can actually be like I take information to someone, or I quite often use it, if I'm honest, as a validation piece. So as everyone does, you have ideas on your workspace and how things are and the pace you are, and actually I will look at stuff that challenges, so either validates what my views are, or I'll see something that actually is contrary to my view and try and look at it open-minded and see whether that shapes or doesn't shape what my view is on everything. So I think I'm quite often drawn to things that are shaped around where my philosophies are, to kind of, as I said, it either gives you more evidence to support what you do, or it throws in something new to think, oh, that's a bigger picture. So without thinking about it, I suppose it's an education thing in that way, that it's shaping my mind.
And again, that's the influence. So you've already talked about how it influences me, and actually you said, well, does that fit with what I think? And again, talk about that thing about already when you think about entertainment versus education, you're always looking for evidence to say, does that fit with my philosophy?
Yeah,
does
and it's not always a conscious form. Quite often I think it's subconscious, but you're drawn to those things that either, like you said, validate, which is a good thing, or you're like, oh, maybe I need to do some more looking into this. And it's not like I'm going in to validate it, but you're just drawn to those things.
So this is a thing that I was trying to. So before I got into I coached for 10 years, but before that, I'd consume a lot of soaps and things like that, a lot of drama involved and things like that. Although on the outside, I'd be happy, but I think that had an influence potentially.
Oh, because you were watching stuff that had a lot of negativity in it, so to speak. You think maybe that was influencing your own mindset
potentially.
So there you go, sparked me an
There
idea.
you go. See.
So a very good friend of mine who lives out in Australia now, who I went to school with over here, and he went off to university and he did psychology at university, and his, I don't know if dissertation is the right word, but he did a lot of research and he did a paper on there's a place where it's in America, so, and I might be getting the names wrong, so please message and correct me if it's wrong, but at the north, where you've got the American-Canadian border and you've got the Great Lakes, and I think you've got something like Chicago or something on one side of the lake, and you've got a Canadian city on the opposite side of the lake, so they're really, really close to each other. They're on opposite sides of the lake, but their statistics around crime rates are like polar opposites. Absolute polar opposites. There's almost nothing in the Canadian one, and big murder, violence, that sort of stuff in the American side. And the principal theory he was kind of digging into and validating was it was all about the news coverage. Wow. So the media coverage in the American city was all built around negative news stories, whereas the Canadian approach, or the approach of whoever it was in that Canadian place, was there was a mix, and there's a lot of positive, informative news stories, as well as just here's what's going wrong. And so his theory was that was pushing people's minds based on what they, I suppose that's your word, and it wasn't a word that was used then, but what they were consuming at the time.
And I love
I've
that.
forgotten about that, but that just made that pop into my head as to his theory was how influenced they are by what's kind of pushed in front of their vision.
So that's brilliant, because I love that. Because
Thank you to Adam Chandler for that great bit of information there.
thank you. I've never met you, but I thank you as well, because I think it's added massive value. It's just made me think of something else. Because when I was going through my tough times, my depression, etc. as well, once I got back into this this sort of development space and all into that, I've actually don't really watch the news. I don't watch it. I absolutely just if it's I might watch it for 5 minutes and I'm off again, because again it's those messages, and I think you're right. And now when we look at the media or look at the messages within the news, they're trying to I'm not saying it's bad, of course you've got to be informed, but there's a lot of, what's the word? When they try to make it bigger than it actually is, the fear,
it's scaremongering.
Scaremongering, and that
sensationalising,
and that can make you fearful of the world, and the way you look at the world, is the way you're going to find the world. And again, it's a bit of that frame about how you do it. So for me, I actually dial down the news a lot. I may look at it for a little bit to see what's going on, but then that's it. It's I really don't have much news at all, if any, at all. And I think that actually is a really good point about the different types of media and how that's influenced the population and the culture in that area. And I think there's a lot in that. So I think this is an amazing thing actually that's come out of that.
I've got a thought, I had some thoughts about it recently now, and we try not to talk too much on current real world stuff now and stuff, because obviously everyone has different views on this. So what I'm going to say now isn't my actual view, it's just a theory I had. But one of the things that there was a lot of coverage for at the start of this year, or in fact it's still a thing now, is the kind of knife crime rate in London. And they're talking about how prevalent it is and what's going on and stuff like that, and giving out the statistics and stuff. And the way it's written is this is the worst it's ever been. And I'm not saying it isn't, but the only reason I know there's more of it is because they're telling me. I don't actually have any real world experience of this. I've never seen any stats from previous years. I've not dug into it because it's a thought in my head. But and again, this is way before we discuss this, but what it is making me thinking is it worse, or are we just talking about it more? And then if you talk about it more, it kind of has a dual effect, because number one is actually, if you're then looking for it, every time you see a story, you're like, I told you it's worse, but you just might be looking for it when they might have not been there before. But it also raises awareness that actually makes something more in people's consciousness than when it's there. And in a number of ways, that's a really positive thing, and it helps flush out real issues. But similarly, once you're looking for a problem, every time you see it, no matter what the frequency is, it validates that it's a big problem. And like you said, those things like that have a big risk of blowing out of proportion and becoming sensationalised.
I agree, and it is like that thing, where you might go to London, you might start to avoid a place because, I've heard about the crime rate, I'm not going to go. It creates fear, and people will stop to do things because of it. And it's about, and I'm not saying you shouldn't have news, you should be aware, because you still need to be aware of things, but it's about being careful about what you do consume. And also, I think the cultural thing is really important, because as humans tell humans other stories, they'll naturally go, I heard this thing on the news, and then then they create a little bit of a story on top of that, and then the things just escalate.
It becomes more the norm. So maybe actually by talking about it being there more, you could be nudging people that it's acceptable to do that thing, because which I suppose brings us back to that whole Canada and America thing.
And which is what we're talking about, the education versus consuming. Like you said, actually knife crime, there's an idea in your head, you've not done your but you've got, but you might talk to someone, I've heard that it's really bad knife crime, and that person tells that person by them.
And suddenly there's an issue that's built by people who've not experienced it, but talk about other people potentially experiencing growth. And again, that's not me saying it isn't an issue,
right, yes,
but I just think it's an example right now, and those things can really run out of control.
And I suppose that brings you back to being aware of what we consume. Just be careful on what we do. So, so entertainment is good, having a balance of it's good, it's what you need to make sure. But so I suppose it goes back to, if you're not getting results in what you want to do, drawing it back to education versus entertainment, if you're not, what are you consuming? I think you need to look at that. And so what are you doing with your time? Are you spending too much time on the entertainment? Is it balanced towards education and balanced towards what you want to achieve?
And I would say yours, Joe, just was in the wrong place in your past if it was doing soaps, because no one needs to be spending their time doing that no matter what.
I loved a bit of soap. I loved it back then, but you're right. But what, when I look back, I wasn't really aware, I wasn't really challenging what I was doing. Now I'm aware of it, then that started things I want to consume, that, be passionate about it. And as I've been more passionate about it, that's then led me to being here and talking about what we're talking about. But then when I went into that, I was consuming a lot of that. So did that? So I suppose the question for me is, did that affect me having that view of the world, like having the soaps, having the news, having all those sort of consuming that type of content? How has that affected me as a person? Then when I've come to a challenge with it, did I have the strength to deal with it? And I did to a certain extent, because I went and talked to people, I did come, but it was very, very touch and go. So I don't want people to go into that space. I'd never ever want people to go to that dark space I was. So this is why I'm doing the podcast. This is why I'm saying, be careful about what you watch. Be careful. I used to love watching horror movies and things like that. And now I'm more away from those types of. I'm not saying they're bad, they're good, and there's entertainment. But again, for me now, I'm moving more away from that and more into this space where, what's that possibility? What are the messages? What are the things that we can do to push ourselves forward? How do we get through adversity? And how do we feel as human beings? And that's really the space I'm in now compared to I'm a totally different person. In fact, if I look at myself, what am I now? I forget how old I am. 20 years
50
ago.
50 something, aren't you?
Maybe 10, 15 years. Yeah, it must be around that. 15 years, whatever it is. I'm a totally different person. But that's because now I'm consuming totally different things. I'm into totally different things. I've now got a purpose. I've now developed that culture. But that's again me dedicating the time to that specific thing, but making sure that the things that I spend in my spare time, I dedicated to that. But having it balanced, of course, in my own way. But in your own...
We talked about this, when we spoke, it's probably going back a couple of years, and your big challenge at the time was actually to get more comedy in your life. And actually that comes from the entertainment side.
Yeah.
And was it Brooklyn Nine-Nine was a big thing to get you into?
It was, yeah.
Awesome show.
Yeah.
Ryan, fan of Brooklyn Nine-Nine?
I've watched a couple of episodes.
Oh,
I need to sit down and watch it.
But it's... And like for you,
Yeah.
so you were actually on that balance thing, knowing that you needed a bit more of that downtime and to do it in the comedy way of those sort of things and getting that balance. If you out there listening want to moderate your content, you can find some great content at JN Coaching Tech. If you stick, I think that was a great segue there.
That's amazing. That's the best link ever. I think that must be the best link on the podcast. Seriously.
So if you put JN Coaching Tech into your search engine.